In Resistance Fall of Man, we offer single-player gameplay. You can play through the entire story by yourself. You can also play with a friend in co-op mode through the entire story. We also have several levels of difficulty that you can play. We also have multiplayer modes. We have multiplayer offline, where you can play with 3 other friends in split-screen mode. And we have multiplayer online, where you can play with up to 39 other players in 40-player online modes.
We have these meetings where the whole company comes together and we'll discuss weapons or enemies or traps or ways to surprise the player. And then gameplay's primary role is to actually then figure out how to make that possible. So it's sort of a mixture of creative and feasibility, and how do you bring those two things together?
What we try to do is, again, give a lot of variety. So in sequences where we don't necessarily have action, we want to creep out the player. You know, there's nooks and crannies, there's shadows for things. It keeps the player on their toes.
We spend a lot of time actually on pacing, and we play the levels over and over and over again and evaluate and tweak. We track everything. We track how many times the player died, how many times they fired, how many times they hit, how many times they missed. Does the player have an opportunity to duck behind a wall and then pop up and shoot somebody, or is he going to get cheap-shotted if he tries to do this technique?
Of course, it's a first-person shooter, so the emphasis is on shooting. But there are levels where you are by yourself and you are running solo through some of these levels, fighting off hordes of creatures. In other levels, you're fighting within a large group of allies against large groups of Chimera. So your tactics differ depending on your situation.
We evaluate the strategies that players are trying to do in the office and verify that the ones that actually make sense work. A lot of times what we do requires a tremendous amount of iteration, and it also takes a lot of suggestions and comments from people all across the company.
The enemy AI is pretty varied. We have the smaller creatures like the leapers who have more of a swarm mentality where they're not really thinking too much, they're just going for the character. Then we have characters like the hybrids who are more, shall we say, troop-oriented. They use squad tactics to flank you. They have cover behavior where if they are getting shot, they're going to go take cover. Then we have some of the larger creatures who will pretty much destroy anything in their way to get to you. So we keep it varied. But one thing that really ties all of the combat situations together is the weapons. And figuring out how to combine them to fight against these very different enemies is what makes the game really fun. The PlayStation 3 has the cell processor, which contains several SPUs. These are additional processors outside of the main processor, which can be used to process other tasks. For example, we have our physics running on several SPUs at once. We have sound processing running on SPUs. We have dynamic lighting calculations running on SPUs. We have collision processing. It goes on and on. The more you can actually offload to the SPUs, the more you can do per frame, and therefore the more you can get into your game.
We can have this really new, unparalleled ability to create an immersive world. We can have planes flying overhead. We can have pigeons, roosting on things. We can have rats running around, smoke coming out of vents, things that explode and leave their pieces around. Just all these very interesting things that in most multiplayer games you won't see.
One of the great things that PlayStation 3 offers developers is the opportunity to develop downloadable content. And with Resistance Fall of Man, the franchise, with our future games, we really hope to take advantage of that, where we can offer players new content as they're online with the PlayStation 3.
The big thing is that the PS3 displays in 1080p, which means that people are going to be able to see things crystal clear. So, the art that you'll make to meet those demands is going to look awesome.
What classically game development has been is, well, we can have a lot of guys, but our environments are going to be a little weak. We do not have to make any compromises. We can do everything in any environment. It is extremely exciting for us.
We are able to really just to abuse the processor, to just run way too many iterations of things, And like, for instance, the sticky ball gun, the Sapper, maybe you could have 4 balls on a previous console, but now, I'm able to run like at least 32, and they can all simultaneously connect with each other and disconnect and grab and everything like that, and it's just like the simulations are crazy, so it's a lot more powerful.
So I think that automatically, just visually and orally, you're going to hear a huge leap over what you've seen before on previous generations. I think that before Resistance, we really didn't do as much concept art. With Ratchet, everybody knew what the style was, and we could actually build environments without a whole lot of concepting. For Resistance, it was crucial to have amazing concept art, and so we have an amazing concept art team who has taken the story and taken input from people throughout the company and created these vistas, these paintings, which help the guys who are building the levels understand what the vision is.
I think the artwork really plays a big supporting role with the story. You can't have, this dark and gritty story about the fall of Europe and have like candy colors all over the place. It's got to be dirty. It's got to make the player feel uncomfortable. It's got to be like, walking down a back alley.
There was a lot of exploration, but one of the things that we've always wanted this game to be was really gritty, realistic, and really immersive. Like, we really wanted something to feel a game to feel really cinematic, and that was a lot of what drove us. And the change from going to something that's highly cartoony and stylized to something that's really gritty and realistic, that presented a whole new set of challenges.
Now, I have to say that the vision for this game is completely collaborative. There have been so many people who have contributed to the story, the weapons, the enemies, the backgrounds, that it is certainly much bigger, in my opinion, than what we imagined initially, just in terms of the variety, in terms of the quality of content that we've gotten in the game. But of course, concept art is an extremely important aspect of making sure that the levels fit together and that they offer something new every time you move further into the game. Nathan Hale is a mystery in the story. He doesn't tell the story. The story is told by another person named Rachel Parker. She's the head of British intelligence, and she's trying to figure out what makes Hale tick. Now, Hale in the game goes through a lot of, shall we say, trials and tribulations that the player can experience as Hale, but the results are not really evident until much later in the game. Rachel helps explain to the player what's going on, but we try to create this interesting persona with Hale. He's got an interesting background, he's got interesting abilities in the game, and there is a very interesting ending when it comes to what happens to him.
For a game like ours, where we wanted to tell a story and we wanted to be fast action, it had to be the weapons that are your input, and they have to be more interesting than traditional military weapons, because you've already played those games. The weapons are the player's input, his only control over the gameplay. You're defined as to what you can do in the game, otherwise you're watching a movie.
All the characters have a very different animation style to them. You'll notice right off the bat the way a creature moves, and you'll know what kind of creature it is. We have creatures that walk around on the walls versus creatures who will stay far away from you and shoot at you versus creatures who will try and run up to you and grab you. There are even some creatures that fly around. And all these movements are unique to each creature type, so that you won't feel like you're fighting the same creature over and over and over again with a different texture swap or something like that.
Part of playing this game is about discovering who the Chimera are and where they're from. And we really had a lot of fun coming up with the different forms for the Chimera, because we wanted to, A, make them all scary, B, give them different combat abilities so that you as a player would have a lot of kind of new challenges every time you faced a new Chimeran enemy. We introduce more and more as you go through the game, so you will see the Chimeran army grow in its diversity. Designing a level is a really collaborative process. First of all, we have the story, which sets up the background. Then, of course, we have to overlay gameplay on it. We have to figure out what kinds of things we want to have happen in the level. We decide what kind of enemies we want to introduce, what kind of battle feel we need to keep the gameplay varied as you're moving through these levels, and we start seeding the level with our enemies.
We're going to see an introduction mission, which is allow the player to get acclimated to the controls, learn about the character, and to generally get a sense of the world and what's going on. And from there, you have levels which propel the player through a very interesting storyline as they're obtaining great weapons, seeing scary enemies, and constantly being surprised.
Making cinematics is tough. It takes a lot of manpower to create just a few minutes of cinematics footage. Instead of having pure action footage with every movie. We've integrated recon photos, narration, maps to give it a different feel and to make it feel a little bit more like a historical accounting of what goes on in the game. And I think it's actually been very effective.
Well, we are a team that collaborates a lot with the design team. So everything starts out with a map from design that summarizes the main gameplay points that we need to accomplish in a given level. We take that and we iterate. We make a rough map. The designers take it and tweak it a little bit. Then it's back to the environment team to really flesh it out and to bring it up to a high level of art polish.
And the tuning process can take a long time because we're playing it over and over again. We're watching other people play it, and we're figuring out, is this too hard? Is this too easy? Do we need more ammo? Do the enemies need to be thinned out? Those are the kind of questions that we're constantly asking ourselves until the game is going final. That happens for every level that we've created for this game, and it's one of the things that we do well at Insomniac.
Some of the best moments in Resistance Fall of Man happen because of our AI. It's amazing. There's times where you're fighting behind trenches and then some of your guys are behind cover and then the leapers jump on a guy's face and you have the choice as a player to either save him or let him perish. And by saving him, of course, you have more people to help you through the level. And everything from running from around a corner and seeing your allies in trouble to be hiding behind cover and watching the cover around you crumble and now being fully exposed and then trying to run from this mammoth mech who's trying to track you down.
Now what's important is that you have an opportunity to keep your guys alive as you're moving through the game. We've instituted what we call hero moments in the game. And in these situations, in combat situations, your allies will often be attacked by enemies. Usually these attacks are very physical, so you'll have an enemy jumping on a guy, knocking him down and shooting him in the head. Well, you have a couple seconds to actually shoot the enemy before he kills your ally. If you do that, then your ally lives to continue to help you fight. And these guys are effective. They will take down enemies for you. So the more allies you save, the better it is for you. On the other hand, if you're like me and you like to watch your guys die, then it's kind of fun. Weapons in a first-person shooter are everything. If you don't have great weapons, then you don't have a good game. We wanted to give the player a few standbys, like the assault rifle and the shotgun, and then introduce a lot of stuff they hadn't seen before in first-person shooters.
We have 3 different categories of weapons, and we kind of pepper them throughout the game. So for instance, you start off with the assault rifle right off the bat, but then pretty quickly you'll get the alien assault rifle, the hybrid assault rifle there. But all of a sudden now you've got these strange alternate fire abilities with the tagging. So you can tag characters, you can shoot all the bullets, and they'll swarm after that tag. So you can nail hybrids with that, and it'll jump after them. If you shoot a trap, the bullet swarm will be there, and then if you shoot another trap, it'll jump over to that spot. So you can literally kind of have this huge ball of bullets ready. Guy comes around the corner, and then you tag him, and all the bullets will just leap on him and kill him.
Weapons. Guns and guns. I think that's something that's really unique to Insomniac. There's always been a push to make weapons gameplay something that sticks out. We don't cut corners.
My favorite is probably a weapon called the Sapper, which shoots these kind of gooey, foamy balls all over the place, and you can set traps for the Chimera, and then you can detonate them at will. It's pretty cool gameplay for a first-person shooter. That's something you definitely haven't seen before in another game.
We have the auger that can actually shoot through walls, and then its secondary fire is that it creates a shield. But since it can shoot through walls, you can create a shield that protects you and at the same time fire through and mow down the enemies.
And I'm thinking, wow, there are a lot of hardcore players out there who are going to discover this on their own and kind of unlock new depth to the game. And that's what I think is really cool about Resistance. We are building what we hope is a robust online community for Resistance Fall of Man. We have chat rooms, we have buddy lists, we have parties, we have all sorts of ways for you to communicate with other players, both in and out of the game.
We're offering 40 players online. We're also offering 4-player split screen offline. Well, for the people who really just want to get in and see what it's about, they could go into the match-made mode. They don't have to worry about sorting through lists of games. They don't have to worry about all the little finicky things that make multiplayer a real barrier to entry.
If you want to go in and have a good time and frag people or play in our Meltdown mode, which is fairly unique already, you can do that and have a great time. But if you're the kind of player like me, actually, who likes to build up stats, we offer rankings and stat building and rewards for moving up in terms of your rankings. And we want to keep people coming back to the online and continuing to kind of boost their skills and their stats at the same time.
We want the players to animate nicely. When you shoot somebody, it feels like it. When you snipe somebody and you have a line of sight on them, that you actually hit them. We want the players to feel immersed and not feel like they're playing over the internet. The goal is to make an experience that's so smooth and so silky that it actually feels like you're playing a single-player game, but you know that you're against real people.
Of course, when it comes to replay, nothing is better than online because you're always facing off against different opponents. Every battle's different, and we're also offering a lot of community support on our websites where you can check your rankings, you can check out who of your friends is actually playing Resistance Fall of Man. So we want to make sure that people are really enjoying both the offline and online experience.
With Resistance, we really wanted to have a cohesive feel between the music and the sound design and have them blend into each other, evoke emotion in a more subtle or subconscious level, and more akin to like what music for a film does. We wanted to do the same thing with music for this game.
I think in the past, people have completely discounted audio's importance in games. I usually suggest to people, try playing a game with the sound off. The experience is completely different. At Insomniac, we've really discovered that sound is at least 50% of the game experience. If you don't have good audio, then the environments and the characters simply aren't convincing.
We sent out an email to our company and said, bring in any old clothes you have, boots, pieces of plywood and brick and concrete that one of our sound designers found in a desert someplace, so that we could record custom Foley. And it was really cool because it's really difficult sometimes to find sounds for the right type of a scuff or surface textures.
So we've spent a lot of time coming up with convincing ambience for the level so that when you walk into a city level, you hear sounds that are appropriate for the city. If you walk into a more natural level, you hear the background sounds that are appropriate. The enemies, we spend a ton of time coming up with sounds that are appropriate for these very different enemies.
So a lot of our actors actually record for multiple roles, and I'd say we probably have no less than 25 actors, most of them are speaking multiple roles.
I sent the troops back to Southern Command for a well-earned rest.
All of your allied soldiers have different things to say throughout every level, and we're just shoving more and more in to make them more believable.
The weapons we know are one of the biggest things that Insomniac has always done really well and really right, and we really pride ourselves on delivering a lot of unique and hyper-realistic audio for the weapons.
With PlayStation 3 and with Blu-ray, we have the opportunity to create a lot more sound than we ever had before. Now we are kind of going for broke with Resistance Fall of Man. My name is Ted Price. I'm here from Insomniac Games to describe what's going on behind the scenes in Resistance Fall of Man. Here we have a battle in Manchester between a bunch of Chimeran hybrids and humans. We've got a lot of guys shooting at each other. They're also shooting at me, but since I'm in God mode, they can't really hurt me. And what I'd like to do is slow the game down a little bit to demonstrate what happens with every frame. So I'm going to throw out what we call a hedgehog grenade. But I want to point out that there's a lot of other things going on here. We've got a bunch of humans back here. We've got a lot of hybrids who are stationed behind cover. A ton of characters who are all sending their AI requests, navigation requests, physics requests to the SPUs. Since they're sending so many requests for processing at the same time, this can typically bog down a system that has very few processors. Fortunately, with the Cell, we have a lot of processors to work with. So let's go back to this little hedgehog here. This hedgehog is sending requests about where it is in space, what it's hitting, and now its AI routine is getting activated. It rises up, and here we go, bang. All 50 of these spikes get shot out from the hedgehog grenade, and each one of those spikes is running its own AI routine and sending navigation requests to the SPUs. Now, as these spikes travel out, they hit the hybrids. As you can see here, some of these hybrids are getting whacked by these spikes, and as they fall in their death throes, We also activate our ragdoll routines. These are fairly complex and expensive routines because each one of the joints that are contained within these hybrids has to send its own requests for physics calculations and things like how far should I bend, how far should I bounce, to the SPUs. But fortunately, because we are using the PlayStation 3's SPUs, we can do all of this per frame and not drop frame. And that's what's key about utilizing the PlayStation 3's cell processor efficiently. So there you go. We're back in the battle, and we're going to let these guys kill each other while I just watch in the relative safety of God mode. So there's just a quick glimpse of Resistance Fall of Man. It's coming out November 17th with the launch of the PlayStation 3. Please check it out.